Alright, hello. We are going to have a play with Mix's code from yesterday and see if we can write a reducer function. Prior knowledge for this is having read the Git book for today about reducer functions. That will really help with context, so I don't have to explain so much, which would be good. Okay. So here's Mix's code. Let's just see that it's working. I have Browserify spun up and here's the project. If I click on it, things toggle and this is all very nice. This is the line of code which modifies the state, and this is okay, but we're going to take this and move it into a reducer function and also write tests over the top of it. Okay, well, first of all, let's do a real fast recap on what reducer functions look like. Their signature is that they take a current state and some action which describes what happened, and they give us back a whole new state. These are all just objects, they're just dumb objects, right? State is a dumb object, just like this state here. An action is just another object, and the new state is the modified, well, actually not modified, it's a whole new copy of the state. Okay, cool. That's great, but what does an action look like? Well, it's just an object, and has one mandatory key or property, and that's type. And that type is a string normally. It's the easiest way to deal with it, and we tend to just capitalize everything to try and signify to programmers that it's a constant. So we could try and think of something like a good type name for this action might be something like toggle done for now. That seems good enough. Maybe we could change it to toggle action done or something like that, but whatever, this seems good. So type is not optional, but there is another optional argument we can give, and that's payload. And in this case, our payload is going to be the index of the to-do that we want to set to done or not, to toggle. So later on this will be some ID, but for now we don't really know. It will just be a number, but it will vary depending which to-do we're toggling. Okay, rad. Let's get rid of that stuff. And let's start factoring this out into a few new files. So let's make a reducer file. Correct. Why can't I make a reducer? Yeah, right. Great. So we're going to make a reducer function. We will probably need to require an hyperscript. And we'll need to export our reducer function, which we're about to write. Module exports reducer. And let's name it here. Okay, that's cool. And we could probably even pop the parameters in here, state and action. Okay, so we don't need TypeScript in there, what am I thinking? Okay, great. Now let's have a think about testing this. We have an empty tape testing file. Let's do the most basic hello world thing, just to see that our testing framework is set up okay. Test hello world t.ok true. Alright, let's run the test really quick. Great, hello world should be truthy, one test of one passing, mint. Okay, great. Let's have a think about how we might test our reducer function. So first of all, I guess we should import it. like that. Cool. Now, let's see. Well, let's test the toggle. Oh, I'm not getting autocomplete, which is frustrating. Let's test toggle done. And let's do some arrange act assert. So arrange act assert. Well, arrange, that's going to be our initial state, and what would be nicer than using the initial state that we have here? Seems like a good example, so we can do this, and I think we're going to change this to be const because we're not expecting to reassign to state, so it feels better to make that const rather than let. Okay, and our act is where we want to actually call our reducer, and we're going to store that in const. We're going to do const new state equals, here we call our reducer, and we're going to pass it the current state and some action. Well, like we were thinking just before, the action is going to have some type. Toggle done, it's just a string. There's nothing magical. If you've heard about typed language and that kind of thing, JavaScript's not that. So there's nothing magical, it's just a string. And now this optional payload thing. Well, what was the payload again? Yeah, that's right. Okay, so it was the index of the to-do that we want to update. So let's assume that we're just going to update the first one. So we're going to go with 0. Cool. And now our assertion, well, we expect that the new state dot to-dos at location 0 dot done is true. Okay, so in fact I can simplify this test even further. Instead of saying equal, I'll just say true. Rad. Okay, so we have arrange, the initial state, act where we call our reducer, pass in the current state, and the action has this type and payload, and we expect to get back some new state where the to-do is done, and that should be true. Okay, let's run the test, and it fails. Reduce is not a function, and that's because this should be dot slash. Let's try again. Okay. To-dos have undefined. So at the moment it's because our reducer is not returning anything, and this we expect. And there's our reducer. Okay. Well, there's a few ways we might structure a reducer, but the most common pattern is just to use a switch case block. So let's switch on the action type. This is by far the most common pattern. And we're going to catch the case that the action type is the string toggle done, and if it is, then we're going to write some code and then return what we got. We're also just going to do a we're just going to do like a catch-all kind of case here, where if we don't match any cases, we're just going to return the state just like that, unchanged. Okay, so what do I need to do here? Well, actually this isn't too scary. We already have the code from Mix's stuff. So without thinking too hard about it, let's copy paste and then see what we need to change over. Well, not too much. The only thing is that probably, well, definitely we don't have any variable index in scope. So what index do we need? Oh, that's right, it's on the action. So it's the payload on the action. So let's change that. Let's go action.payload. And we also need to do the same thing here. Okay, cool. And then we could just return state. Alright, let's see if it passes the test. And it does. Okay, this is really great. So this is a first stab at a reducer function. This is pretty good, but it's still not perfect. You might remember there are some rules of reducer functions, and one of them was that a reducer function has to be pure, and it's not allowed to modify the state that it gets passed in any way. Currently our reducer function takes the state and changes something about it. This is a no-no. So let's see if we can, we'll do it to TDD and see if we can make the test fail and then work out some way of fixing it. So let's go look back in our reducer test here. Now there is a really useful module called Deep Freeze, which we could go have. It's written by Substack. Where is it? It's down here somewhere. So recursively object freezes objects. So it will do this no matter how many objects are nested inside, it will recursively walk through them all and freeze them. This is what we want. And if our JavaScript is using strict mode, which it will be, then it will actually throw an exception if you try and modify the state. So that's what we'd like to use. So let's require in deep freeze, and we'll just call it freeze here for ease of use. Deep freeze, semicolon, and so as part of our arranging, let's call freeze and pass in state. Alright, let's try again. So if deep freeze is working correctly, then we should see some sort of exception. Let's run the test. Okay. Is this what we expected? I'm actually not sure. It's the joy of coding. We neither cannot assign to read. Oh yeah, read. Okay, great. So here's the error. Type error. Cannot assign to read-only property done of object. So this is because of deep freeze. It's saying the object you're trying to modify is read-only. You can't do that, and it's thrown an exception. Perfect. So let's see if we can fix that. Okay. Well, what we're going to do is we're going to use the module clone. It does what, oh damn it, not clone of Sublime. Well, we just want clone. And we want clone JS, otherwise I'm going to get nonsense. There it is. Offers foolproof deep cloning of objects, arrays, numbers, strings, etc. Perfect. Okay, so we're just going to go for the pattern where in our reducer I'm going to bring back our reducer on the bottom here. Let's require and clone. And we're going to go for the pattern that whatever we get passed in as state, we're going to clone it and store it as some variable new state. And that way we'll never ever, and then we'll just always modify the new state, and that way we'll never ever kind of accidentally modify the state that's passed in. So var new state equals clone state, and then all we have to do is kind of go through and change up some things. So this is going to become new state, and same here, and same here. And let's always return the new state just to be kind of thorough. Okay, great. Let's run the test and see what we get. Pew! Okay, this is really good. So, to recap, remember that remember that a reducer is not allowed to modify what it's given. It must return some whole new state, and it takes in these action objects which have this mandatory type and an optional payload on them. Okay, this is a pretty good start. So we have a passing test and what's hopefully a useful reducer function. Well, we should try and make it work. So this is pretty nicely TDD. So I'm going to get rid of the reducer here, and I'm going to switch back to our index.js. Let's require in the reducer, and it's going to be a reducer like this. Okay, and here for now what we're going to do is just do something like this. Let's have a first pass and we might refactor it a little bit more. So state equals reducer. Oh, let's try that again. So we're going to call our reducer function, we're going to give it the current state, and we need to give it some sort of action object. So our action had the type toggle, toggle done, and that was a string, remember, and the payload, what's that going to be? Well, it's going to be the index that's passed in here. Okay, and then we can get rid of this. Great. Let's see if it works. Let's save it, refresh it, it rebuilt, and it looks like it still works. Okay, that's pretty cool. I think for now that's where I think we might leave it. There might be a little, or there definitely are ways that we can improve the situation a little bit so that actually functions that dispatch things from the, where's our to-dos here? Instead of just dispatching this click handler with an index, they may do something a bit smarter where they just send an action object up to the top level. But for now, I think this is a pretty good example. Great.